Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess, and we are on episode 27. Uh, Unlike last time, I did my research on what episode it is. So this is basically the sixth episode in the new format of just kind of me getting on a topic and rambling about it, going on a rant, riffing. And today's no different. I'm kind of enjoying the format. Again, like this is kind of like a journal for me in a way, and a little bit of, I don't know, just catharsis, sharing what I'm up to, sharing my thoughts. And I'm going to keep doing it and keep evolving it. And I'm excited to do so. With all that rambling, let's get to it. So right now it's halftime of Thursday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are playing the Patriots, and I'm highly interested. Actually, they just kicked off the second half. That was the fastest halftime ever, which I'm thankful for when I'm like watching the game and not trying to do something at halftime. But I literally took the trash out, plugged everything in, and it was the third quarter. So I'll try not to get too distracted. I'll leave the game off to the side. But it's actually a great way to segue into today's topic. So something I've been really like proud of myself for and just thinking about this week and recognizing is consciousness. There's actually, I may have mentioned this before, but I have this calendar quote thing you flip every day. It's a new date, new quote. All quotes from the yogi Sadhguru. If you're not familiar, definitely a good follow for, just one-off thoughts to start the day. You may not agree with everything that you see, but definitely some thinkers. Today, I started off the day by reading, when you're in a great hurry to do something, just hold back a few seconds. That's all it takes to shift from compulsiveness to consciousness. And I think today's society, especially myself, like what I notice from other people and really what I feel and have felt in my life is that compulsiveness. We have really strong instincts, strong drives to succeed, kind of by the definition of what society says success is. And honestly, a drive to kind of avoid pain. And that's really what consciousness is feeling everything, both the good and the bad. I think when I've been either depressed in my life or kind of going through it, I've said this before too on the podcast, but your feelings definitely like demand to be felt. So avoiding them, kind of letting yourself be subconscious or unconscious when you're feeling that way, or masking with some type of, dopamine, serotonin, or adrenaline, or, substances that assist that. That pain just sitting in there, and it's kind of rotting you from the inside. And I can tell you, like, I've had all kinds of crazy side effects that I didn't realize were kind of from that. Like the more I express myself, the more I move my body, do yoga, meditate, and kind of let those things go, feel those feelings and let them out. The better I feel, the healthier I am. My resting heart rate overnight is like 45 beats per minute. I'm kind of like checking my pulse sometimes. And over the last like 6 months, my heart rate variability has been higher than it's ever been. And it wasn't really that great. I kind of had like hypertension and just health issues from being just stressed out and just holding on to, the past. And, we love to experience good emotions, but we experience them and we let them pass. So why don't we just do the same for bad emotions? And that's the answer is it's painful. And then to avoid that, you turn to compulsive behaviors. And so that's really the topic of today. And I'm just going to talk through a couple of situations that I've just had, kind of come up recently, and kind of excited about. So yeah, to get into it, kind of deciding on like how I want to do this. Like a lot of times I like to talk about kind of like a global issue, maybe kind of like a national issue, and then kind of like a personal thing, and just kind of tie it all in and show how, in the short term, consciousness is painful, but it's worth it. So I guess I'll start with a world issue. I think one thing I see a lot of, especially with the two kind of like pseudo wars going on, is a lot of people feel kind of the pain of the loss and the suffering of, people who are in these situations. And quite frankly, I think a lot of us know that we are contributing to, as tax-paying Americans, our dollars are going to support, quite frankly, probably both sides of both wars. So, problem number one is that we don't know the extent to which our actual tax dollars have gone and supported these causes. Sure, it's a couple $100 here or there. But aside from that, just seeing the suffering, seeing these different... I saw a post this morning. It was like, I think it was in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, kind of one of those more industrialized desert cities, and they had a thing. It's all the Palestinian children who have been killed over the last 18 months, I think, and it was just all these teddy bears lined up, and obviously that is a kind of a heart-wrenching thing. And if you have a heart and you're semi-conscious, you kind of think like, wow, that's a lot of fucking teddy bears. And I think I used to compulsively feel those emotions and then feel uncomfortable and feel powerless, and then I would, kind of, just give in to those emotions really easily. And it's not that I don't feel those emotions now, I just feel them with the consciousness and the rationality of that's really sad, but this is the nature of the world, it's the nature of human beings. I think before I would think that human beings are generally good, and why is this happening? But really the reality of life is it really, to me, 50% good, 50% bad. There's kind of a consequence to everything. And if something bad happens, you can kind of assume that karma is going to take care of you in some other way. And if something good happens, celebrate it, but prepare yourself for the next step, whatever that is. Don't, celebrate too long. You got to keep it moving and keep, waking up, and whatever your craft is, whatever you're doing in life, keep putting in that effort. And don't let, so that way if you're disappointed, at least that you put in 100% to something, there's nothing else you could have done. I think at the end of the day, that's the regret, is there's more I could have done. But when you feel at peace, it's really because you did your best. And if you're able to accept things consciously, just knowing that that's true, I think that is a good way to be. So back to the post, I just read through some of the comments, and it's all really kind of sad perspectives. And I didn't leave a comment myself, but there's really no positive perspective on that post. So at that point, you kind of have to be neutral about it and just say hey, I'm just a guy that lives in the United States. If I were in power, I know what I would do, but I'm not in power. And so what I can do is affect the lives of people in my community and be kind to the people I come across. Do my best to affect change in the world the way I can. And I definitely didn't used to accept that as good enough. I think I wanted to push myself to be able to do more. And in the future, it could be the point where I have enough resources and time and ability to maybe make a difference in some way, that I wasn't able to in my 20s or 30s or 40s, but who knows? I mean, at this point, it's the reality situation, and what I have to do is continue to do my work. That's how I make my contribution, and try to right some of that wrong indirectly. Bring some good into the world in another way. So that's just one kind of situation where I noticed, I saw a post that I think I literally thought to myself, like, man, that would have made me really upset like 5 years ago. And not that it didn't today, but it didn't stop me from doing what I need to do and get through the day and do my work and keep it moving and record this podcast. So on a national stage, I think one story that's kind of hits near and dear to me, the Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa last week. I think I posted this podcast, and then it was Thursday night football. I was watching. It was literally a week ago, like the game is on, and he got hit in the head while he was kind of running forward, being really aggressive, trying to. The game was pretty much out of reach. There's really no reason for him to do this. And he lunged forward with his head first. He could have slid feet first. But he lunged forward with his head and was hit by a defender. And when he went down, you could tell, like, when he was in the air, his neck kind of bent a funny way. As it hit his head on the defender, and then he went down, and he had the symptoms. His arms went up. There's a specific term for that neurologically, but basically it was like, all right, this guy's had a history of concussions, and we just watched him have that on national TV. Like, this is like mega concussion. He didn't get carted off the field. He did walk off under his own power, which 2 years ago he was actually carted off. And had, I think, a little bit worse show of symptoms. But from what I know about concussions, they are cumulative. I think that's kind of how my own case is and was. I had a pretty bad one when I was 14 that went undiagnosed, that now when I think back on it, I mean, it was scary. And I acted compulsively. I was a freshman on varsity football team, and like, that was my life. If I kind of said anything and there was any chance of me not playing on varsity, not being deemed, not competitive enough or not, man enough, that would have ruined my life, at least in my eyes then. Now it probably would have helped me out. But it was interesting to me to kind of have that happen, and just see, I mean, one, like, how I was able to push through it, but also now I kind of understand where people like Tua might be at, how they might be feeling. And his case is a little different. He's got a lot of millions of dollars on the line. I'm sure some of it's guaranteed, so he'll get paid whether he comes back or not, but a competitive dude and someone like me, I think if I was in his shoes, I would be really considering it, like, okay, what supplements do I need to take? What do I need to do? Sensory deprivation tank, like anything I can do to get my brain to just heal and be okay. Not only for my future, but so I can play again. And the national media reaction is like, of course he can't play again. Like, look what happened 2 years ago. Look what happened tonight. Like, it's just going to keep happening. And this is kind of the compulsiveness and the fear. And it's funny because people tend to feel fear as if they were that person. Like, if they know what Tua is thinking and how he feels. And they know, like, oh, if I was in his shoes, I'd be terrified. I'd retire. I'd just sit on my millions and whatever. But in Tua's position, I mean, he's someone who's hyper competitive, played football at Alabama, got himself to the NFL, made millions of dollars. Like, this isn't someone who has like a normal level of risk tolerance and courage, quite frankly. So I think it's an interesting conversation how we compulsively just like judge someone's situation, um, instead of consciously kind of thinking like, hey, yeah, that's scary, but like he's gonna make the best decision for him. And me myself kind of knowing, I mean, I'll be honest. So like my choice would be to try and get my brain healthy enough to play again, and make sure I have the best future possible. But like that's probably not the right call. Like knowing what I know now and like how my recovery after concussions has been over the last like 10 years. So I like get both sides. Like this is a very like complicated thing for someone like Tua, and it takes kind of more conscious, brain power to really sit and hold those two ends of the spectrum of like full retirement and coming back to play. It both seem crazy. So to make that decision, it's really going to boil down to like intuition kind of thing, which I think can only be deciphered if you're coming from consciousness. Compulsiveness tends to be from fear. We might call it intuition, but it's really fear. And with consciousness, it can actually be that intuition, and being able to look at fear and intuition, realizing how similar they look and sound. It's kind of wild. So on that note, getting to kind of a more personal situation. So I had, trying to think of the best way to say it. So really just had something come up, something like a trigger that happens to me every now and then, occurred. And I immediately recognized what it was, where it was coming from, and probably faster than ever before, I kind of have like a plan. When that happens, I know, okay, this is a chemical problem in my brain. Like my cortisol, I just had a fight or flight response. My cortisol spiked, my adrenals are pumping, I have adrenaline, like it's like I'm getting chased by a tiger or a lion, whatever, jungle cat, bear, you name it. I'm full panic mode, really, honestly, for no reason. And to catch yourself in this moment and be as conscious as I was about what was happening was pretty surreal. And I honestly was super pumped about it, because especially when you have like a TBI, previous concussion, post-concussion syndrome, whatever it is, it's kind of hard to like diagnose, have someone else diagnose you, diagnose yourself. Like it's really like a day-to-day symptom, feeling. Like I can tell you now, I think way more clearly than 5 years ago, and almost 100% better than 10 years ago. That's really the only way I can like say it. So when your brain is already kind of feels like it's under attack, concussions kind of put your brain in a state of, panic. And then you have something, mentally or emotionally triggering. It's like double duty. I mean, you go from, it's almost like I had a friend this week in lab. He showed up to lab late. Well, he knew he wasn't going to get credit. He was pissed because it's, we only can miss like 3 labs per term. And I mean, he had a legit reason. He got pulled over. He had like 30 minutes of sleep the night before. And I don't think he missed sleep for any specific reason other than he just couldn't sleep. He just had straight up insomnia, which is a whole nother issue. A little bit of consciousness maybe could help. But all of that to say that, like, I could tell he was basically like physiologically drunk. Like he was in lab, he was there, he was talking, but like he wasn't learning anything. He wasn't helping us with the tasks because he wasn't going to get any credit for the day. And we were all like cool with that, but he was just lingering around. You could tell he just had like almost no conscious brain function. He was just living on pure survival. Like he was awake, but he wasn't there. And I felt like I lived like that for a long time, without, I couldn't sleep because I couldn't regulate my brain. My pituitary gland, couldn't do what it needed to do, and my pineal gland couldn't do what it needed to do. I had like horrible sleep-wake cycles, and when you can't sleep, you can't fix your brain. Like the only time your brain really gets cleaned and fixed is like overnight. So I definitely like, first and foremost, could like empathize with him, and I almost like wanted to tell him like, hey man, you should just go home and go to sleep, or like go catch a nap somewhere and get a coffee and like get ready and try to like get something out of today, even though like make chicken salad out of chicken shit. But like I've been there, and like honestly I don't even know if there's any like fix to that. You kind of just have to survive and then try to sleep the next night, and hopefully your sleep pressure is high enough that you'll go to bed. But anyways, yeah, so without being too specific about the situation, it's not really about the situation for me, it's more about my response. I was just really pumped, and kind of handled it, got a good outcome, and then like afterward like processed it. And what I was talking about before, of like, instead of like numbing the pain somehow, I actually have been to 2 yoga classes over the course of, what was it, 3 days, basically 4 days, that really helped me like ground and center myself, especially today. So today I was actually pumped. Before I got 2 points to make after this. So quick story, 2 points, and boom, we're gonna get out of here. It won't be like last week, no long episode. But today there's opposing yoga called chin stand, and it's something I felt like I could do for a long time, but I wasn't able to. So today I was doing a version of the flying splits, and the teacher was just like, hey, if you extend your leg, you're in chin stand. So basically like a half of my body was in chin stand, which is basically like a headstand, but your chin, your neck is kind of exposed to the ground. It's crazy looking. It's kind of like a scorpion, but my feet aren't kind of forward over my head. They're straight up in the air. Kind of like the letter J. Letter J is the best way to explain it. So I just pushed my leg up and held it for about 20 seconds the last time I tried it, and new skill unlocked. A day like today, I mean, you just never know when something cool like that's going to happen. It's just a little thing. But the fact that I really was kind of, even though something that happened like earlier in the week, I think, I just knew like, hey, I want to make sure, I want to pull this thing out like root and stem, and like process it and leave it behind. And that's what happened. And ultimately, even better than that, what I did was I was able to transform that energy into chin stand. So now like new skill unlocked. Sweet. So that's really like a very best case scenario. And yeah, it just feels good to live consciously that way. Again, like, I'm a big believer in negative energy. It doesn't have to be bad. Like, if you have negative feelings, I mean, you can turn it into something positive. And it doesn't, I mean, you don't, I think the thing I used to do was like the water boy, I'd picture someone's face on the other guy and tackle him real hard and get all pissed. And that's kind of how I thought you had to deal with your feelings. And I realize now as an adult, the water boy is a parrot. It's supposed to be a funny movie. When I was a kid, I was like, that's so cool. He's like, drilling those guys. Sweet. Like, let's beat some people up. Cool. Like, I want to be good at football. And now just realizing like how silly that was for me to think that was how you do it. It's kind of funny, but that is ultimately how I played football for a long time, was just try to, amp myself up and get mad and, go hit someone. And I was very good at it. So good that a little too good, had my brain rattle around in my skull one too many times, but it was a whole hell of a lot of fun. But So anyways, that's my story about chin stand. So 2 things to touch on before we get out of here. I mentioned, I think these are going to be like future topics maybe. I don't want to talk about this the whole time today, but a little adjacent to consciousness. So another thing I use my consciousness for recently was in the past, I think I strive to kind of protect and serve. I'm not like military or police, but I've always kind of felt drawn to that type of career. I didn't go that route, but not to say that I wouldn't do it. I think it's a cool profession. It's definitely something I would do. So when I think about that, how that shows up in my life now, so I don't have like a role where that's like my job. So when I get to know people, I think someone's cool, I think someone has good intentions, I think they're a good person, and they have a problem, I am typically like pretty open to like being a friend you can really count on, offering advice, and even like as far as like if someone asks for help, like I'll hey, I'm here to help, and not only that, like I have some suggestions, and I kind of add that on top of it, and really like going out of my way, but that's like how I like to be, again, like protect and serve. I try to be a good person as much as I can. And what's interesting about that, something I've kind of learned in the last year is this really your problem to solve? So that person might ask for help and you might be willing, but a lot of times people want a solution, but they're not maybe willing to do that conscious work. They're kind of acting from compulsiveness, and you're coming from a place of consciousness, and you kind of tell them like, hey, if this was me, this is how I would do it. And then you just watch them not do it for like weeks. It's not to say that like, my solutions are like perfect by any means, but it's like, hey, you want to fix something, you just got to try a couple things, and try something, doesn't work, okay, next thing, and you just see people really like doubling down and like buying back into what they say they don't want. And it's good to be like positive and want to help people. I know that about myself. I know that it's a good thing. But at a certain point, you do have to ask yourself, is this really my problem to solve? And being able to categorize that early on and like offer support, as in like maybe emotional support, like, hey man, you got this, you're going to crush this, like you, not us, not we, I think is kind of a superpower, knowing like when your effort is going to be useful, because otherwise, I mean, there's so many people in the world, you can't help everyone, and like I want to help people where it can make a difference, and maybe foster like a bond, like a friendship that ends up being really cool for a long time. So that's kind of what I've been looking for, been more selective about. So yeah, it just made me think of like the guy in lab, at that point, like, I could give him advice, but he was basically physiologically drunk and like nothing I said was going to help him. So I just, hey man, cool. Thanks for being here. We like joked around. I try to like keep his spirits high, just kind of talking shit. But that was the extent of my help. And sometimes that's just good enough. So I noticed that about myself this week as well. And I thought that was cool. And so the last piece, I'm kind of blanking on what it was. Didn't write it down. But I know it will come to me if I filibuster long enough. So this is CTE, y'all. I posted on my Instagram recently a meme from an account called CTE ESPN. Like CTESPN. So I can't even say it right. But yeah, when it gets to be this time of the evening and you just went on a rant, you kind of start to forget things. And we're a half hour into this episode, so I promise I won't ramble too long. If I give myself about 30 seconds, I think it'll come up. A little update on Thursday Night Football. It's 21-3, the Jets over the Patriots, and Patriots are punting on 4th and 26. So, looking pretty good for Aaron Rodgers and the boys. Shout out to the episode a couple back where I talked about Aaron's quote, where he said to relax. And I think I've been doing pretty good at that. So, shout out Mr. Rodgers. All right, they're going to a commercial break, so no more filibustering. Oh, yes. Got it. Boom. So I was going to kind of start the episode out with this. So here's my misconception about consciousness that I think kept me from leaning into it in the way that I am now before, maybe at least a little bit. Kind of a societal thing that we have that I think was drilled into me. It's really the difference between self-consciousness and consciousness, and then also thinking that self-consciousness is somehow a negative quality. I'm someone where I think in the past, and I don't know, see, it's funny because I'm really not that shy of a person, but there's times where I am just super socially anxious for no reason. And it genuinely is for no reason. It's not that I don't like people. And maybe it's around people that I feel like are maybe not conscious. And that honestly could be it. Because I feel like I've always been kind of painfully aware and conscious. And just injured. Like had a brain injury. But like when I was kind of feeling better, I would just shrink back into compulsiveness and kind of shutting down to kind of avoid the pain, right? So this is a hot take, self-consciousness is not a bad thing. Being self-conscious, being like kind of shy, whatever, is not a bad thing. It just means you're not using it right. So being self-conscious is like, to me, understanding how you show up in a space and like where you fit in, and like that's an honest take on where you fit in. Like if I go, into a room full of people and say I'm the founder of Amazon, like dude, you're not Jeff Bezos. What the fuck? So clear, that's like a very extreme example, but like if I go try to be something I'm not, people kind of know, they can tell it's not who he is. And I find when I lean into who I am and do things that I do, and kind of act like myself, pretty much accepted in most social situations, unless I really just don't get along with a specific person. And even if I don't, it still kind of can like coexist in the same space. So my self-consciousness, don't know where it came from, but it was signaling to me that kind of something else was wrong. I thought that was just me being strange. In reality, like there's a lot else going on with my brain and everything. I just was generally in a state of compulsiveness, a state of kind of survival mode. So I think that's where that was coming from, because now when I walk into a space, like a public place, like full of people, whatever it may be, I'm just very conscious. Like I'm aware of my surroundings. I'm aware of like I'm a 250 pound, 6'2", very large man, imposing. Bump into people if I'm not careful physically. If it's me and someone small in a dark alley, they're like panicking, that kind of thing. So I'm just aware of that. And yeah, I feel like now I'm like more receptive to others. I kind of immediately understand when someone else is conscious, and I'm able to be friendly in a way that keeps it moving, or if I find someone interesting, I can hold a conversation, and just things I like wouldn't have done before, but I think just more so because I was just trying to keep it moving and get home and be safe and go to sleep and like try to heal, versus now, I kind of have the capacity to mix it up and just enjoy new experiences rather than working from a place of that compulsive um, survival mode. So I guess what I'm saying is like consciousness is obviously a good thing. Uh, and I think there is one last piece. So consciousness, I believe, is a muscle, and the more that you turn it off and try to avoid pain, however you do it, kind of the more atrophied that muscle is. And what that is in your brain, and the amygdala is like the fear center, I think, is where a lot of that comes from. And the more, fearful you are in life, the more afraid you are, the more compulsive you are, the bigger that your amygdala gets. Like they have brain scans of people, MRIs that show that your amygdala enlarges. And then, when you practice mindfulness and meditation and other exercise properly, the amygdala shrinks. So even, like a muscle in your body, your brain's not, protein based. It's got a lot of other stuff in there. There's protein and there's fat and water. But it can grow and change and repair, and it's like everything in your body is elastic. It can be repaired. It may not be new like if you were a baby, but like it can regenerate somewhat. But that requires you to, be healthy physically, do all the right things, sleep especially, and that for me has been the main key. I got my chemistry right through resting and honestly through exercising, lifting weights, pushing myself in the right combination, nourishing with better food, better, more consistent vitamin consumption than ever before. All things that I think are a key foundation to like doing this kind of work and getting your brain to a place where you can start to think this way. Pull yourself out of compulsiveness. Take a few seconds and like watch the watcher. I mean, that's what mindfulness and meditation really is ultimately too, is when those thoughts come up, you're like watching those thoughts, come and go. And I remember when I first started to meditate, I would get really frustrated that I couldn't do it. And now it comes as easily. I mean, I'm meditating pretty much all day. I'm like thinking like in school, for example, like I'm learning something and I'm like, all right, here's the fact. What do I think I need to know this for? Like, how does this make sense? How do I contextualize this in the entirety of my education? And then kind of file that thought away. I think by doing that, contextualizing it with everything else that I've learned, I definitely retain it better. At least short term, hopefully long term. But yeah, so in other words, consciousness, I think, is just so imperative to life. And that's why I thought it was important to talk about today. And the better, more healthy your body is, the better your brain will function, and you can exercise and ultimately have the energy to and exercise or execute the the brain function to actually have these thoughts. Like, I think for a long time I wasn't even capable of this type of thought. Maybe that was a part of my brain that was damaged somewhat, to some extent, and it, like the amygdala, other areas shrink. The more you learn, obviously the memory centers in your brain are going to be overloaded and overworked, and you're going to have to sleep and eat food and rebuild those. And like, I think it's just a constant work in progress. And that's all really human beings are, work in progress. So wherever you are at in your work in progress, I hope this episode helps you. I hope my thought process, my experiences, my encouragement, coming from a place of someone who was lost for a very long time, but feel like I've kind of found myself, not in a delusional way, but in a way that's, sustainable and repeatable. Like now, every time I have that experience, that trigger goes off, I can use the tools I used and keep it moving, on to the next thing. Keep every day just showing up the way I need to. So until next time, this is Blaine, out.